Welcome to Beer and Iron, where we talk about real cast iron cooking and share recipes with beer as an ingredient. Grab a beer, set that cast iron on the heat, and prepare to flip your expectations. We're serving up tales and recipes that are well seasoned and never half-baked. This is where the good stories live. I'm Sulae, head honcho of hot takes and hot plates, here to share a story, cook something worth eating, and turn your plate into a celebration of taste and tradition. Forget everything you think you know about cabbage. Today, we're turning humble ingredients into a full-blown flavor rebellion. Welcome to Beer and Iron's Cabbage Smuggler Stew, where cast iron, beer, and bold flavors collide. If you think cabbage is boring, buckle up. I'm about to tell you how to make a ground beef and cabbage stew that's hearty, smoky, and guaranteed to make your kitchen smell like victory. Grab your 5-quart cast iron Dutch oven, and I'll tell you a little bit about this recipe. Also, at the end, I'll share a short story history about cabbages, and bonus, about a poor village dried up by a villain and how cabbage saved the day. When I was a school nurse, there was this magical window, about an hour or two before the end of the day, when kids would start migrating into my office like a herd of lost baby goats who took a wrong turn at recess.
Nurse Kevin, I have a headache.
Well, Nurse Kevin is what they called me. I didn't choose the title, but I wore it with the dignity of a man who passed the NCLEX on the first try. They'd ask for Tylenol. Easy enough, right? Absolutely not. I'm not that kind of nurse. I'm the kind of nurse who sees patterns. And the pattern was this: a whole parade of kids with headaches around the same time each day. So I'd ask, "What'd you have to drink today?" while casually ignoring their Tylenol request like it was a spam email. They'd look at me puzzled, like I'd just asked them to explain the tax code.
Well, Nurse Kevin, I don't know. I had my milk at lunch.
Child, you've gone all day on a half pint of milk. Kids don't respond to logic. You have to give them imagery, big, dramatic, cartoon-level imagery. Child, there's more water in a cabbage than in milk. You'd been better off eating a whole head of cabbage than drinking that milk. And they'd look at me all crooked-like I had just told them Santa was outsourcing to Amazon. So I grabbed one of my brand new refillable water bottles, the ones I bought with my school nurse budget at the beginning of the year, back when I still believed in things. I'd wash it out, fill it up, and hand it over. Here, drink up.
But, Nurse Kevin, what about my Tylenol?
My, who do they think they were? Shareholders? There's no my nothing, child. Your headache isn't from a Tylenol deficiency. It's from a water deficiency. Now drink up and get back to class. They'd stare at me, all pitiful and confused. I mean, how was I supposed to know third graders don't know what deficiency means? Half the time they acted like they knew more than most of the teachers, right up until they ended up in my office with an arm shaped like a banana because they thought gravity was more of a suggestion than a law of nature. What are you looking so sad for? You got a free water bottle out of the deal. When I was in school, I had to drink from the bacteria-infested water fountain, and only at recess, when the football kids had already shared enough backwash to fill a kiddie pool.
Nurse Kevin, what's backwash?
Because the universe has a sense of humor, the very next day the same kid would show up with the same headache. Child, where's that water bottle I gave you yesterday?
I don't know. Maybe at home?
At that point, I didn't blame the child. I blamed parenting. But that's just me. Anyway, I got to thinking about cabbages and how much water they're hiding in those leafy little layers. I mean, I knew cabbage had more water by volume than milk, but it was still hard to picture. Like, how is a crunchy green bowling ball basically a hydration grenade? So I decided to run a little experiment, a culinary science project. Let's see what happens if I do this moment. I made a recipe that used almost no liquid, just enough to keep my conscience clean, and I waited to see if the final product would be a stew or a culinary cry for help. Oh no, It was a stew indeed, a full-blown, honest-to-goodness, spoon-standing upright stew. Cabbage said, "Don't worry, I got you." And it just hydrated the whole pot, like it was auditioning for a role in Moisture the Musical. Soup versus stew, the great liquid debate. Here's a bit of trivia for you. What actually makes this a stew and not a soup? This is one of those classic culinary gray areas, like arguing whether a hot dog is a sandwich or whether cilantro tastes like soap. People will fight about it online for hours, but most chefs, cookbooks, and food folks agree on a few key differences: liquid, texture, and who's really running the show in the pot. Liquid content, the big one. Soup is mostly liquid. Broth is the star of the show, and everything else is just floating around like extras in a movie. You can practically drink soup straight from the bowl, and if you do, no judgment. Stew has much less liquid, just enough to keep things cozy and simmering. The result is thicker, chunkier, and more grab a spoon and brace yourself. The solids are the main characters here. So who's in charge? Well, when it comes to soup, it's broth forward. Light, sippable, often a starter, or a gentle, "I'm being healthy today" meal. When it comes to stew, solids forward, hearty, filling, and absolutely the main dish. It's the kind of food that warms you up from the inside out. Perfect for those cold winters when even your eyelashes consider freezing. To get started, I like to get everything mise en place, because once that pot gets hot, it's showtime, not scramble time. Here's what you're going to need: a pound of ground beef. I tried sausage in this, and honestly, it was a bit too rich. I prefer the ground beef. 1 medium chopped up head of cabbage. Seems like a lot of cabbage for our 5-quart pot selection. I'll talk a little bit about this in a bit. Any cabbage variety will work. Red cabbage will definitely change the color of the meal, but I'll leave that up to you. 1 medium chopped onion. 3 to 4 cloves of minced garlic, or a spoonful of that jarlic. I've gotten pretty fond of that jarlic. 1 to 2 cups of chopped carrots. I like to go with 2 myself. 1 can of fire-roasted tomatoes with the juices. Just open it up and dump it in. For the seasoning, get 1 tablespoon of smoked paprika, 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh thyme, or 2 teaspoons of dry thyme, 1 teaspoon of salt, or salt to taste, 1 teaspoon of crushed black pepper, and again, pepper to taste, and 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce. There's 1,000 ways to say Worcestershire. I want a bit of bite to my meal, and also a bit of liquid to get things steaming and the party started. I'm going to add 1/4 cup of a porter or stout beer, or if you want to, beef broth will work just fine. Just 1/4 of a cup is all you're going to need. Toss in 1 to 3 bay leaves, and listen. Have you ever really stopped to wonder if bay leaves are actually necessary? Most folks don't. They just toss one in because their grandma did, or because the recipe said so, or because the leaf was staring at them from the spice cabinet like, "Pick me, coward." But here's the truth. People don't think bay leaves do anything because they never do a proper pot-to-pot taste test. They make a stew in January, and then they'll make another one in April, and by then their taste buds have moved on with their lives. No one remembers what a bay leaf-less stew tastes like. Bay leaves are like the quiet kid in class who never talks but somehow gets the highest test score. They're not loud, they're not flashy, but they absolutely pull their weight. Think of them as the background music in a movie. You don't notice it until it's gone. And suddenly the whole scene feels weirdly flat, like everyone's acting in a silent film. And in blind taste test, people consistently pick the version with the bay leaves as richer, rounder, and more complete, even if they can't explain why. It's not magic. It's just a little leaf doing its quiet little job. At the end of the cook and right before serving, I like to slip in a bit of butter, just a pat or two. It gives the whole thing a silky smooth finish, like your stew suddenly decided to put on its fancy clothes. And if you want a little twang, a little "hello, I'm awake now," splash in a touch of apple cider vinegar, just a touch, and then taste it and see where the spirit leads you. For serving, I love dropping a dollop of sour cream right on top and finishing with a sprinkle of chopped thyme or chives. That cold sour cream hitting that hot stew is as satisfying as sticking one foot out from under the covers when the bed gets too hot. Here's why I call it Cabbage Smuggler's stew. Along with the story I'll share at the end of this podcast, the only liquid we add is the juice along with those fire-roasted tomatoes and that 1/4 cup of beer. That's it. No broth, no stock, no just-in-case splash of water. Cabbage is absolutely loaded with moisture, way more than you'd expect. And like I mentioned earlier, it's basically nature's uncovered hydration mule. The cabbage smuggles in all the liquid this stew needs, hiding it deep in those leafy layers like contraband. As it cooks down, the cabbage releases everything it's been hoarding, flooding the pot with enough moisture to build a rich, hearty base. And that's the secret behind the thick, cozy texture of this stew. The cabbage does all the heavy lifting, quietly, suspiciously, like it's done this before. Now let's walk through this recipe real quick. Step 1. Brown your beef. Heat your Dutch oven and drop in that pound of beef in one solid sheet. Don't poke it, don't stir it, don't break it up. Just let it sit there and develop a deep, crusty attitude. When meat sits still against that hot cast iron, two things happened. First, the Maillard reaction kicks in, that magical browning that gives you those rich, savory, almost roasted flavors. Next, you get the maximum surface contact, which means the maximum browning. And maximum browning means maximum bragging rights. If you break the meat up too early, it releases its moisture, cools down the pot, and suddenly you're steaming beef instead of searing it. Steamed beef tastes fine, but seared beef tastes bold, beefy, and like it has something to say. Once the beef is browned on both sides, then you can break it up, or pull it out in big chunks and break it up later. Dealer's choice. Either way, get it out of the pot and set it aside. Step 2. Sauté the aromatics. Add your chopped onion and the garlic to the pot. I put them in at the same time. Cook until they're soft, fragrant, and making your neighbors wondering what you're up to. This is the moment when your kitchen starts smelling like you know exactly what you're doing. Step 3. Add those carrots. Toss in the chopped carrots and let them soften a bit. Give them a minute to relax into that heat, like they're settling into a hot tub after a long day of being a root vegetable. Step 4. Add the tomatoes. Pour in the fire-roasted tomatoes with all their juices. If you hear sizzling, that's just flavor announcing itself like it's entering a room wearing a cape. Step 5. Add your spices and your beer. Add the smoked paprika, thyme, salt, pepper, Worcestershire sauce. Things will start thickening up a bit here, and that's perfectly fine. Now pour that 1/4 cup of beer into that pot, and if you want to, pour the rest of it in you. A frosty glass is part of the cooking process. I don't make the rules, I just reinforce them. Cheers. Step 6. Add the beef back to the pot. Scoot the veggies away from the center and return the brown beef to that open space. Use a spatula or a meat chopper to break it up into chunks. I keep mine on the large side. Big, hearty pieces saying, yes, this is stew. But you do you. Step 7. Add the cabbage in batches. Pile on a good amount of chopped cabbage, enough to make you briefly consider upgrading to a bigger pot. Stir the cabbage in well. Cover the pot and let it cook down for about 5 to 7 minutes. When you lift the lid, the cabbage will have magically shrunk like it just remembered it had somewhere else to be. Stir it in. Now add a second batch. Same deal. Stir, cover, let it wilt for another 5 to 7 minutes. By this point, you'll start thinking, hey, this all might actually fit. I might actually get this whole cabbage in here. And you probably can. A third batch is totally fine, but give the pot a good look first. Ask yourself, do I need more cabbage in this stew? If the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, congratulations. Now you have bonus cabbage for another meal. Future you will thank you. At first, you'll barely see any liquid in that pot. That's normal. You'll need to stir more often to keep things moving. But eventually, the cabbage will start releasing its hidden reserves, and you'll start seeing a gentle simmer forming. This is the moment the stew transforms. Thick, rich, and deeply comforting. The cabbage is doing the work. Trust the cabbage. Now you might feel tempted to add even more cabbage at this point, especially if you've got some sitting there on that counter staring at you. I would not recommend it. The cabbage in the pot is already well on its way to becoming stew royalty. The raw cabbage, well, it's still raw. Step 8. Add the bay leaves. Toss in 1 to 3 bay leaves and let them do the quiet, behind-the-scenes magic everyone keeps talking about. They won't shout, they won't sparkle, but they'll absolutely make the whole pot taste more put together. Just remember to fish those dudes out before serving. Bay leaves are flavor contributors, not dinner guests. Final touches. For that silky finish, slip in a pat of butter, maybe 2, and let it melt right into that stew. Want a little bit of brightness to wake things up? Splash in a little bit of vinegar, maybe some apple cider vinegar if you're feeling fancy. It's amazing what a tiny bit of tang can do at the end. And to serve this, serve it with a generous dollop of sour cream and sprinkle on some fresh thyme or some chives. It's rustic, hearty, and packed with flavor. The kind of dish that earns second helpings without even having to ask. It just sits there in the bowl looking warm and inviting, and folks keep coming back all on their own. Now here's a brief, wildly true history of cabbage. Cabbage didn't always come in those tidy round heads we all slice today. Picture this: chalky sea cliffs, salt spray stinging your face, yellow flowers trembling in the wind. And there, clinging to the edges of the world, grows a tough little plant, bitter, leathery, leaves scattered like rosette hugging the rock. This is wild Brassica oleracea, sea cabbage, cousin to wild mustard, hardy enough to laugh at storms and salty enough to thrive where almost nothing else does. Early peoples along the Mediterranean, especially around the Aegean, where related Brassica species grew, noticed this survivor. They gathered the leaves when hunger pressed, boiled them to tame the bitterness, and realized this plant will keep you alive when the world gets stingy. Over the generations, they saved seeds from the best ones. The plants with the bigger leaves, tender leaves, slower bolting. Slowly, patiently, the wild rosette began to change. By the time the ancient Greeks were philosophizing,
"Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food,"
cabbage already had a reputation. They called it the miracle food. Eat it raw before a feast, they said, and you won't get drunk.
Of humble foods, cabbage is most excellent. Let a man eat it raw before drinking, and he shall be less overcome by wine.
Cato the Elder later doubled down on this in Rome, because of course he did. Legends swirled. Some claimed cabbage sprang up from the sweat of Zeus or the tears of a grieving deity. Theophrastus, Aristotle's student, wrote about the curly leaf and smooth leaf kinds. This wasn't just food, it was medicine, a hangover cure, and a symbol of resilience. The Romans took it everywhere. Pliny, the Elder, cataloged varieties, marveling at the leaves and the early heads that impressed him enough to write about them. Wherever the Roman legions marched, Britain, Gaul, Rhine, the cabbage followed like a royal camp follower. But the real transformation happened slowly, quietly, in the hands of farmers. No one invented the cabbage head. Instead, generation after generation selected plants where the central bud grew fatter, where the stem shortened, where the leaves cupped inward and overlapped like pages in a secret book. Shorter internodes, bigger terminal buds, protective outer wrappers. The head formed almost by accident, and then by intention. From loose, leafy kale-like forms, to the first loose heads in Roman gardens, to the tight, dense globes of the Middle Ages. Medieval transcripts show the payoff. Cabochas and potage, a humble dish of chopped cabbage, simmering with broth and marrow bones. maybe a whisper of saffron if you were lucky. Peasants ate it plain to survive winters. Nobles dressed it up. Fermented into sauerkraut, it kept sailors alive across the oceans, fighting scurvy long before anyone knew about vitamin C. By the 19th century, breeders were showing off giants, mammoth flat Dutch cabbages that looked like they belong in fairy tales. And today, that same ancient DNA, shaped by human hands and stubborn hope, gives us the perfect round heads waiting in fields, ready for your jaggercoal or a simple winter stew. So the next time you slice into cabbage, think about those wild cliff dwellers defying the sea, of Greek philosophers chewing the leaves to stay sharp, of medieval cooks stirring their pots by candlelight, of farmers patiently selecting one more perfect bud. It's not just a vegetable. It's a 4,000-year collaboration between nature and human persistence. Now y'all all know I can't let you go without an anecdote, a little story. I mean, come on, this is Beer and Iron. A recipe without a story is just, well, food. And we don't do just food around here. The Cabbage Water Smugglers of Drywell Gorge. In a forgotten corner of the world, where every home kept a 5-quart cast iron Dutch oven at the hearth like a family heirloom, the people of Drywell Gorge faced a drought unlike any other. These Dutch ovens were the pride of the village, black-bodied, heavy-lidded, seasoned with generations of hands that knew how to coax miracles from simple ingredients. They had simmered stews and healed feuds, braised meat that brought the neighbors together, and held more family stories than the elders could remember. But now they sat cold, silent, dormant, like sleeping giants waiting for the world to wake them up. For this was the reign of Warden Dustin the Thirsty, a man who hoarded water the way dragons hoard gold, except dragons are a little more interesting. Dustin was more like a lizard who found a puddle and decided it made him king. He kept the wells locked. He patrolled the streams. He measured the rainfall with the intensity of a man timing a soft-boiled egg. He even declared morning dew a taxable miracle. The villagers, behind his back, called him things like
Dusty Dustin,
the human raisin,
Captain Cottonmouth,
Sir Sips-a-Lot,
the Parched Prince,
and
Dustin the Desiccated.
But never to his face. They were far too thirsty for that. The drought just didn't dry up the wells. It dried up the people. Their lips cracked. Their faces tightened like old parchment. Their voices rasped like wind through dry, dead leaves. Even the strongest among them felt their knees wobble when they tried to lift their Dutch oven lids. Weak people don't rebel. Weak people don't argue. And weak people, they don't make stew. And Warden Dustin the Thirsty liked it that way. Everything changed the night old Mother Larkin marched into the village square. She was a woman built from equal parts of grit and garlic. She had once chased off a bear with nothing but a wooden spoon and a bad attitude. She lived through 3 husbands, 2 plagues, and 1 unfortunate incident involving a goat and a church bell. And she carried a cabbage the size of a toddler. She dropped that cabbage into that Dutch oven with a thunk that echoed across the gorge. A sound that made every villager's heart twitch with memory. It was the sound of meals past, the sound of comfort, the sound of hope. She leaned in and lowered her voice like she was letting you know a family secret and said,
"This is how we beat Dustin, child."
The villagers stared.
beat Dustin with a cabbage.
Mother Larkin explained,
"Child, cabbage ain't nothing but a big ball of water wearing a leafy coat. More water than milk, more water than Dustin's dry heart. A cabbage is a whole bucket of hydration hiding under those leaves, and nobody will think to look twice."
And she was right. Warden Dustin's men inspect wagons, barrels, boots, and pockets, but never produce. The cabbage was beneath their notice. A cabbage was harmless. A cabbage was perfect. So the villagers began smuggling water in the only form the warden couldn't control: Cabbage. They rolled cabbages across the border like green cannonballs of hope. They piled cabbages into wagons. Children carried tiny cabbages in their pocket like contraband water balloons. One man strapped cabbages to his chest and insisted they were for posture. No one believed him, but everyone admired his commitment. Every cabbage that made it past those guards was tossed into a waiting Dutch oven. Those 5-quart beauties with those heavy lids trapped every drop of moisture and seared beef like a blacksmith's kiss. At night, the villagers would gather in secret. They browned beef in one solid sheet, letting the crust form like a declaration of independence. They sautéed onions and garlic, and the whole gorge smelled like a rebellion. They added carrots, tomatoes, thyme, paprika, and just enough broth or beer to wake the pot up. Then came cabbage, chopped, piled high, stuffed into those Dutch ovens until the lids barely fit. And as the cabbage wilted, it released its hidden treasure. Steam, moisture, stew. The villagers drank. They drank deeply. They drank gratefully. Their lips softened, their faces filled out, and their voices returned. Some cried, real tears, warm and bewildered, tears they hadn't seen in years. One man sobbed until his knees gave out, swearing he'd forgotten his face could even leak. Strength returned to Drywell Gorge. The people stood taller, their hands steadied, their Dutch ovens rattled with purpose again. And that's when Warden Dustin the Thirsty made his final mistake. He tried to ban the cabbage. He declared it a suspiciously juicy vegetable. And he claimed it was hoarding illegal moisture. He even posted guards to interrogate leafy greens.
At once!
But by this time, the villagers were no longer weak. They were hydrated, they were fed, and they were angry. They marched to Dustin's manor with their Dutch oven lids held like shields. The clang of cast iron echoed through the gorge as they chanted his nicknames.
Dusty Dustin! Sir Sips a lot! Dusty Dustin! Dusty Dustin! Sir Sips a lot!
Dustin took one look at the crowd, their bright eyes, their steady stance, and their well-hydrated fury, and he knew the day was no longer his. The wells reopened before sunset, and the villagers celebrated with stew and a tall glass of water. Oh, wait. This is beer and iron. We don't do water. The villagers celebrated with stew and a frosty cold pour, the kind that clinks, sighs, and makes the whole town feel like they've done something worth toasting.
Cheers!
Now, have I changed your mind about cabbage? This one's a good one, y'all, I tell you what. This one's hearty and bold. It's an easy weeknight meal that leaves plenty of room in your guilt bucket for the comfort foods waiting on you this weekend. Make this stew, enjoy the rebellion, and let me know how yours turns out. If you survived the flavor uprising, subscribe to this podcast. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Hey, share this recipe with someone who still doubts cabbage, because every revolution needs a convert. And this stew, this is how we win hearts and stomachs alike. Now, y'all don't be strangers. Y'all let me know how yours turns out at beerandiron.com and join the conversation. Remember, at Beer and Iron, there's always room for one more at our table. From our skillet to your table, and from our tap to your glass. We'll see you next time on beerandiron.com.